Hello YouTube! Today I'm at the boyhood home of Frank and Jesse James, and this is a interesting day. They are doing some fixing it up, so we get to see a little bit more of how it was constructed than we normally would. Normally it would be covered in clapboards. This was a three-room cabin. So you had a kitchen, and there was a bedroom, and then there was another bedroom. This section right here, after Jesse was killed, his mom, well, Frank was here. This section they took off that third room anyway. This is a Sears or mail order add-on addition. So it was brought all up here in crates, and they put it all together and added it on. But Mom was pretty much of an entrepreneur. Somebody came along and saw them tearing it off that third room and offered her some cash for it, and she saw an opportunity, sold it, and they took it around the country and exhibited it as a room from the Jesse James's home. As you can see, they're doing some work on the cabin, but on this side, with this door would have been into the kitchen, and that window led into the kitchen. The window in the middle, well, the next window in, that would have been into their mom's bedroom. This is the window that the Pinkertons threw their bomb into the kitchen, and somebody kicked it into the fireplace thinking that it was gonna, if it exploded, it would just go up through the chimney, and unfortunately it didn't. It sent shrapnel out through the building. That's where she lost her arm below the elbow, and they think she had her arm around her youngest, and he got a belly wound and died later that day. So, but everybody was gathered in the kitchen because they thought that was the safest place. Let's get a little bit closer here. As you can see, it's a log cabin, but it's not so much squared up logs as it's very thick planks acting as logs. They're about, I think, 6 inches thick or so, and then they covered it up with clapboards. And I think when we get up into the museum, I'll be able to get a picture of what this looked like back in the day. When Jesse was murdered, he was originally buried right here. And this is the original footstone at that time to mark off graves, because it was thought to be bad luck to walk on a grave, and they would put head and footstones. So this would be able to mark the grave. And the original monument was about 8 foot tall. And I don't know if you can read it, but what it says is, devoted husband and father, Jesse Woodson James, September 5th, 1847, murdered April 3rd, 1882, by a traitor and coward whose name is not worthy to appear here. Now I say original grave. That's because in the 1970s, there was a lot of claims that Jesse was here, or Jesse was buried in Texas, and they decided to exhume the body. They did some testing to make sure it was Jesse, and it was. But there was all kinds of stories about how he was high on marijuana, because the family grew hemp. And 1970s people, hemp marijuana, ooh, it's the same thing, which is not. But when they did testing, they found out that he did not smoke, did not drink, no drugs were ever in his system. However, he did chew tobacco. He's now buried up in town under a flat stone, because when they took the original marker up there, people would start chipping away at it. So they decided to move that out of there. Now his mother, like I said, was an entrepreneur, is that she would sit up by the grave of her beloved Jesse and tell stories, and for a small fee. And the stones that are on the grave, they would haul up from the local creek and put it on there, and for a quarter you could take a stone off of Jesse's grave. And I believe they have some, they're still doing it up here at the museum. I'm not going to get one. James family did own slaves. They only had a few. That's a reconstruction of the slave quarters. However, a lot of the times that they would sleep in the house, and the young children would play with the James kids, the smaller ones, because they try to treat their slaves very well, because again, small place, they treat them like hired hands, although even though they weren't. But one of the children, it was thought that he had been fathered by Jesse and Frank's stepfather, and it was proven by DNA that yes, they were, and they have descendants of that son or that child today. And I think there's something about that up in the museum. So there's Jesse at 16 years old, 1864, when he was fighting as a guerrilla during the Civil War. And over here in this safe are some of the items that he owned. That was the last bridle that he ever used. And let's see, last cartridge belt that he used, boots he was wearing when he was killed. So this is Jesse James' actual saddle. And I'm so used to seeing saddles with the horns on it, but and the one next to it, obviously set up as a side saddle. That was Frank James' wife's, and this was Frank's. Here's a nice picture of Jesse and Frank's mother and their stepfather, and you'll notice that she was missing at least her hand, part of her arm, and that was from an explosion in the house caused by the Pinkerton men that were after Frank and Jesse and blew up the house. They said dynamited it. And in some of the movies they show her dying, but actually she did not, but she did lose an arm. Here's one of Jesse's riding gloves and a pair of his spurs. These are the original handles, or from the original casket of Jesse when they exhumed him. And they also found that bullet that was near his right foot, and they believe that that was when he was wounded in September '86 in the Northfield, Minnesota raid, and then he carried that bullet in his foot for 6 years. And that's a picture of Jesse laid out after he died. And right over here is when they exhumed him, that's what the casket looked like. So that picture, it says, "In God We Trust," was the one that Jesse was dusting and straightening when he was murdered. Well, this is Frank, and he surrendered to the governor of Missouri in 1883, was put on trial in here and in Alabama, and in both places he was found not guilty and was a free man. When his mother died, he came here, took over the farm, and he did die here. This is a piece of the Pinkerton bomb. So I'm thinking that it was filled with gunpowder and probably things to be used as shrapnel, and then covered in a cloth, set on fire before it was thrown in. So here's a picture of what it looked like way back when. And here's another shot. And as I said, the people were picking away at it. This is all that is left of an 8-foot tall monument that stood at his original gravesite that we were just up at. And that's the original, what it originally looked like at his grave, with his mom standing next to it. So the boy's mother, Esmeralda, died on February 10th, 1911, in a Pullman car on a passenger train on its way from Oklahoma to Kansas City, where she'd just spent 2 months visiting with her son Frank. Well, I think standing here with the James boys and their mom is a good spot for me to say goodbye, and I am going to get on the road and see what other interesting places I can find. See you later, YouTube.